Oh, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 5th of January 2018. And please, first let me welcome all of my returning subscribers and to the new subscribers just joining this channel. I am so pleased that you've come to join this conversation and look forward to joining me on many future videos. Thank you so much. And here is further confirmation that Europe is in really big trouble. And just to put this in context, this is about the ongoing issues that are taking place in actually the whole of Europe, and I would like to look a little deeper into some of those financial issues today, and some newspaper clippings that I picked up, and I think you'll find it quite interesting because our good old friend George Soros is saying that basically Europe is done. Brexit has cracked the egg open, and basically that Europe cannot survive. And Niall Ferguson gets into some of the debt issues now. Niall Ferguson is a fairly well-known economist. He's made many such prognostications on different situations in the economy. But George Soros, he's quite the character. This is probably what I would consider the devil incarnate. And this is a man who collapses currencies, throws countries into turmoil, and then goes into vulture capitalism, okay, picking up the bones, picking the meat off the bones of what's left. And it's kind of interesting that he was sent to live with an uncle of his during the Second World War. Soros is of course a Polish Jew, and he was sent to live with a German uncle who was a lawyer and who became a Nazi officer, and he would accompany his uncle on his rounds as he repossessed the goods and possessions of the Jews, bank accounts, whatever could be taken. And there's actually a very interesting 60 Minutes interview where George Soros basically says, well, it was just a twist of fate, and sometimes you're on the upside and sometimes you're on the downside, but there was no feeling or compassion in this man for the people who had been injured in the Second World War by the actions of the Nazis. And so here is a heartless soul who basically really doesn't care about anything. He's had an awful lot to do with the globalist movement, and who knows what provocateurs Soros has financed in the past, because this is a man who loves disaster capitalism and he loves vulture capitalism. So he loves chaos. And we really don't know, even the whole European mess right now could have been because he has thrown a complete wrench into the works. We just don't know. But this man is capable of an absolute horror show. So the problems in Europe are basically, as I mentioned in my 2019 predictions, all financial. They are overwhelming debt, and you will see in these articles that all three of the countries, the main countries, France, Germany and Italy, have some very serious economic problems. So let's go to these articles, we'll take a little look, and we'll come back and have a quick wrap up. Okie dokie. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. Daily Express. EU collapse is now practically irreversible after Brexit, says George Soros. Britain's decision to break away from the EU makes the eventual dissolution of the EU practically irreversible, George Soros has claimed. The billionaire, known as the man who broke the Bank of England, has said that Brexit is the final nail in the coffin for the EU. He said the UK split from the EU is likely to hasten the breakup of the 28-member bloc to be 27 after the UK exit. He said the consequences for the real economy will be comparable to the financial crisis of 2007-2008, but the implications for Europe could be far worse. Tensions among member states have reached breaking point, not only over refugees but also as a result of exceptional strains between creditor and debtor countries within the Eurozone. Mr. Soros made about £690 million after his infamous bet that sterling was overvalued against the Deutschmark, which forced Prime Minister John Major to pull the pound out of the European exchange rate mechanism. And now Soros appears to be profiting from the turmoil stemming from Britain's vote. On Friday, investors including Soros rushed to buy gold, which pushed its price to a two-year high because both the pound and the FTSE 100 fell sharply in the hours following the result. Soros added, Brexit will open the floodgates for other anti-European forces within the Union. Already political opposition is growing in other countries opposed to further European integration. Barely a day after the UK referendum, parties in places like the Netherlands and Austria suggested they may hold votes of their own. Soros claimed the largest threat in Europe also comes from Italy, where the populist five-star movement may rise to power as a full-blown banking crisis looms. He added that the EU was a flawed construction. Oh, well, how nice. We all knew it was a flawed construction when it began. Oh my goodness, you see these people? They know how to really bugger things up, don't they? And this is from the Daily Beast, and so Niall Ferguson has been saying for years, this is David Cameron, he has not been Prime Minister for at least 2 years. Niall Ferguson, Great Britain saves itself by rejecting the EU. And okay, here's another article from the Express. Europe's €900 billion problem warning as EU has bigger debt before the crash. The European Union debt problem is even worse than before the global financial crisis a decade ago, with almost €1 trillion worth of bad loans weighing heavily on Europe's banks. As the European Commission unveiled new plans to tackle the EU debt problem, it emerged the bloc has a total of €910 billion in bad loans. Bad loans are when payments are not repaid as originally agreed between the borrower and the lender, which may never be repaid, have piled up as an after effect of the financial crisis. Bad loans also make it harder for the EU banks to issue new loans, and it is a prevalent issue the EU Commission wants to deal with. The European Commission wants banks to be able to get rid of bad loans more easily and is considering adopting a new system which would prevent banks from being able to accumulate bad loans. Well, how is that going to work? I mean, most people go into loans assuming they're going to pay them off. These don't just happen on purpose. Well, I mean, I don't know that, but I'm assuming that if people can't pay, it's because they can't pay. Italian nightmare. A crash will cripple the world. Stock markets panicking, currencies plunging in value. We're on the brink of a global crisis, and if it happens, all hell will break loose. Remember the pain inflicted on the world by the Greek debt crisis? It wrecked the economy of most of Europe, caused our dollar to fall, and made our stock market plunge. Now Italy is the concern. Europe's nightmare scenario. If Greece was a sardine, then Italy is a whale. Here are some comparisons. Greece's economy is less than 1/3 as big as Australia's. Italy is 1.5 times larger. That is why the potential for crisis in Italy is already making massive waves. Stock and bond markets have already fallen around the world. The crisis might not come to pass, but if it does, all hell will break loose. We have enough to deal with given rising unemployment, risks in China, and the implications of a cooling housing market. And so you can see here how the debt levels have just absolutely spiked. This is also a good indication. Office construction could start slowing in 2019, report says. The construction industry is always the first to slow down in an economic downturn, and it's the first to pick up steam when the recovery rolls along. A new report from Cushman & Wakefield indicates that the pace of office construction could start slowing down in 2019, reported National Real Estate Investor, with increasing construction costs, uncertainty about the current real estate cycle, and zoning issues drive the shift. Focused economics. Italy business confidence, December 2018. Business confidence declines for the 6th consecutive month in December. The National Institute of Statistics Composite Business Confidence Indicator, which covers the manufacturing, construction, market services and retail sectors, edged down to 99.8 points in December from November's revised 101 points, previously reported 101.1 points, making the worst reading in 2 years. Okay, so here's another article from the Express. EU is weakest world power. Historian says EU facing collapse over the next decade. The European Union is so poorly prepared for the challenges of the modern world that it may not exist in 10 years' time, a leading British historian has claimed. British historian and political commentator Niall Ferguson envisaged an apocalyptic future for the EU, drawing a similarity with the Holy Roman Empire. Analysing how the bloc has so far dealt with crises and considering the ones that loom over it, he predicted the Union will be soon invested by a life-threatening emergency. He said for Brussels it could be tight in the next 10 years. During this decade, the historian believes the future of the EU will be decided. And last article, immigrant overload, not Brexit, heralds the end of the European Union. And this is June the 18th, 2018. Niall Ferguson says Europe is becoming the meltdown pot as a steadily increasing stream of immigrants breaks down political unity between EU member states and pushes voters back to national boundaries. So this really does herald great difficulties in the near future for Europe. So as you can see, the situation is extremely serious indeed, and this will not be contained within Europe. We are so connected now worldwide. All our banking systems are connected together. The world's largest corporations have head offices in every major city in the world. So this is going to be far-reaching. And as I said before, this debt cannot be paid. You know, we've been in a situation where in 2008, imagine it like a hot air balloon. Okay, well in 2008 we ran into a tree and put a great big rip in the side of that hot air balloon, and we've been pumping hot air into that balloon, and it's been giving the appearance of somewhat staying afloat. But we have reached a point now, this rip has got too big and the printing presses just cannot print enough money to keep up with the exponential growth of debt. And this debt is dragging everybody down, every man, woman, child, institution, corporation, and I don't care what their profit and loss statements are, one way or another, we are all tied up in this banking mess. And I don't think there's anything we can stop it. I think George Soros and Niall Ferguson are correct. There is no way to stop this now. All you can do is soften the blow. And this is why I have been advocating basically getting your debt paid off, making yourself more self-sufficient. You know, this is going to be a 1928-29 style meltdown, and you know, one of the things that saved those people back then, or if you can call it saving, but the fact that they had little gardens, they supplemented, and they did what we call bringing in each other's laundry. Or in other words, they helped each other out, and so no money actually changed hands because nobody had any money. In fact, I've heard stories in my barbershop of people who lived through the Depression, and they said there was quarters, nickels and dimes that had been used so much that the head and the tail had been rubbed off them by people's hands rubbing that currency, banging backwards and forwards in people's pockets, because there literally was no money around. And that's, I think, what it's going to look like. The banks are going to have a bank holiday, because until this debt situation is resolved, no bank is going to lend to each other. And as I said before, this interbank lending is absolutely paramount to the smooth functioning of the banking system. And so as that grinds to a halt, you won't be able to get money out of the ATMs. You will only have the change in your pockets. And I don't even know whether people will accept paper bills. I think they will go back to some kind of, certainly in the meantime, some kind of just straight coinage for exchange of smaller things, you know, toiletries, things for the house, cleaning goods, food, that kind of stuff. Anyway, it is going to be tenuous, and it looks like the cracks are really opening up in the world's financial system. So anyway, on that slightly dark note, I've got to say here, they should have let this banking system collapse in 2007, 2008 and clean out the system. But no, they have let it go on, and of course many of these financial institutions are now in a worse situation than they were in 2007 and 2008. So the pain is going to be even greater. If we'd let those banks and hedge funds collapse in 2008, we would actually be pulling out of this now with a good, solid base. We would have returned to investment in manufacturing, into things that actually make tangible products. Right now, the bank will lend you money to buy a corporation, let you gut it out basically, get rid of a whole bunch of people to make the balance books look pretty good, kind of polish this pig, put some lipstick on it, and resell it. but it's not about having something that manufactures something tangible, and that's a big issue. Because at some point, at some level, somewhere, the economy has to manufacture something tangible to come out of all of this money that's being spent. And it seems like only the Chinese and the Indians are actually making any real tangible goods anymore, and reinvesting back in their businesses and their institutions to make sure that they are healthy and sound. Whereas we, like I say, let the George Soroses of this world, these vulture capitalists, swoop in and do all kinds of damage to the actual inner workings of the corporation to make it look good on the outside. And when it's sold, the only option you have is to do the same thing again and flip it, because you're making that company just more and more useless. Anyway, so this is a kind of good bad thing that is going to happen. It was going to happen at some point, but I think we are now well on the way. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe below. Click that big red button, it helps my channel when you do that. And thank you again for joining me on this journey, to all my current subscribers and new subscribers. And please leave a comment below. We always love to hear what you have to say and join the conversation. Okay, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a great weekend, and we will talk to you real soon. See you now. Bye-bye.